Kia spent its time fixing the thing the internet would complain about, but then left the suspension to sort itself out. The 6-speed automatic was supposed to be the weakness. Instead, it's the only part behaving like somebody signed off on it twice. The same suspension that manages the lighter internal combustion engine Sportage now carries an extra 309 pounds of battery, and nobody changed the damper calibration to account for it. Engineering split decision. Before we get into it, Kia's English pronunciation of this vehicle's name is Sportage. Americans love calling it Sportage. We're going with Sportage. It's the same car. Kia's transmission-mounted electric device, which is 4 words for we put an electric motor ahead of the gearbox, sandwiches a 72 kilowatt electric motor between the 1.6-liter turbo 4 and the 6-speed automatic transmission. Plus, there's a wet multi-plate clutch in there that disconnects the gasoline motor for EV-only running. On paper, demanding power that the traction battery can't provide requires 3 sequential mechanical events: clutch engagement, turbo spool, and gear selection, which is something that eCVTs have handled with one simple torque fill. But here, behind the wheel, that entire handoff process is seamless. Low speed, high speed, rolling stops, uphill merges. The transition from electric motor to gasoline motor is consistently undetectable from the driver's seat. This sort of engineering problem is the kind that troubles every hybrid manufacturer, but here Kia's got it sorted. And when we're on the electric motor only, this thing pulls away with the smooth torque of an electric motor, and no surprise, it's rated at 72 kilowatts, but what that means to us conventional thinkers is 224 pounds of instant electric torque, so this thing ends up accelerating like it does weigh hundreds of pounds less. Plus, because that electric motor sits ahead of the gearbox, this transmission actually shifts in pure EV mode. We are in EV mode right now, and those shifts are still a bit unusual, and I appreciate it. Peak torque, according to the spec sheets, 271 pounds-feet at 0 RPM, but from where I'm sitting, not all of those torques arrive all at once. From a stop, the first thing you get is that electric torque that hits strong, and then the boost comes in and you get the torque of the gasoline motor a little bit later as you accelerate through the rev range. At lower speeds, when you're asking for a quick acceleration, it definitely feels that it was engineered that way. But as you get through third gear and beyond, the drivetrain settles down and it delivers torque in a more responsible manner. The 1.6-liter 4-cylinder turbo sounds like a 1.6-liter 4-cylinder turbo, which is to say, it sounds like effort. It's not loud, and the sound deadening and laminated glass take care of some of that noise, but every once in a while, you do hear that motor straining under load. These shift paddles have 2 very different functions depending on the drive mode. In Sport, like we're in now, they function like shift paddles. In Eco or My Drive, they control the amount of regenerative braking. Either Kia saved some space or an engineer lost an argument. The fuel tank in this one is 11.1 gallons. In the other Sportage, it's 13.7 gallons. That tells you exactly how Kia expects this Sportage plug-in to be used. Plugged in first, gasoline second. 2 hours to charge on level 2. There is no DC fast charging. This is the quicker Sportage hybrid, and it feels like it, unlike some other plug-in hybrids that don't seem to be optimized for performance. The entire powertrain here is well resolved. It's coordinated, delivers power and torque immediately, and the transition between gas and electric motor is seamless. But it seems like this is where Kia stopped. Subscribers get notified when new episodes drop on this channel. Everyone else leaves it to the algorithm. If you want to find out when new videos drop on this channel, well, that's what the subscribe button does. I'm legally required to tell you that this segment is sponsored by Go Clean. I'm ethically required to tell you that I use their waterless car wash. Here's the reality of filming cars. They don't have to be perfectly clean, but they have to be clean enough to survive a close-up. I call that video clean. For that job, this waterless car wash is ideal. A few sprays, quick wipe, and the car goes from someone drove it here to camera ready in minutes. I'm not going to oversell it. I use it, I like it, and it's in my kit now. That's video clean. Use code MAX15 for 15% off. Decent turn-in response, and once you get into the corner, there's not much weight that's added to the steering. Remains precise, but there's just very little feel or feedback here. There's very little information that comes from those two front contact patches and makes it through to the steering wheel. Thankfully, there's a little bit of chassis feedback, and yes, there's some body movement, so you always have a sense of what this thing is doing in the corners. Turning radius is reasonably short, making this easy to park even in tighter parking spots, and steering effort is light enough so that it doesn't make parking a chore. Now, when it comes to dynamics, the one thing I have to highlight is the damping, and it's both front and rear. Compression's fine, but it's in that rebound stroke where this thing is a little less confident than I'd like. Initial impacts are absorbed by the suspension, and on smooth roads, it rides beautifully. But when you hit some larger road imperfections and the chassis starts to settle itself, it sends a very clear message to me and says, hey, we need some reinforcements here. This plug-in hybrid wants to take an extra second or two to settle itself after a big bump. And it's rebound control at both ends, but it's more pronounced at the rear, and I think that's because that's where the traction battery lives. And it's the same story as the rest of the vehicle. The powertrain's fully briefed, the suspension's reading an old email. Braking is better sorted than most hybrids, and the handoff between regenerative braking and actual friction braking is seamless. Plus, there are those 4 levels of regenerative braking, and it all works very seamlessly together, except with one thing. The maximum level of regen is not a true one-pedal driving setup. Initial pedal feel is soft, then it firms up as you get through the pedal, and once you're there, you've got great control and modulation. ABS intervention doesn't happen early, so it doesn't startle you when you do need ABS. However, it's a pretty smooth affair. There's no pedal interference, and this thing just stops confidently. Every trim gets 235 wide 19-inch all seasons, which tells you the intended mission for this plug-in hybrid. There's enough sidewall there to help with ride compliance, not enough tread width to encourage you to do anything ambitious. Ground clearance is 8.3 inches, and for you, my American friends, this Sportage plug-in hybrid is sold as X-Line only. The hardware suggests off-road restraint. The badge, however, suggests that someone in marketing wasn't consulted on the spec sheet. If you want to support the channel beyond just watching, the merch store is open. Your support there means more time for us to produce episodes like this, less time worrying about industry access. No pressure, just an option. Seating position is exactly what you'd expect from a modern crossover. You're seated high off the road, great hip point. Visibility is generally good in all directions. These A-pillars are a little bit thicker at the base, so they take up some of that visual real estate when you're parking. This, of course, does have cameras all around, so that does make it easier to park. And in 2026, parking camera systems are more of a necessity than they are a luxury. Kia scores top marks on interior styling for sure. When it comes to the materials, they look like they're more durable than they are luxurious. Seats are comfortable and they're supportive over long distances, no issues there. But where they let me down is with the bolstering when the corners get interesting. The side bolsters in these seats are not intended to support spirited cornering. There's more than enough adjustment in this seat and the steering column to set up the perfect interface. Reach the pedals, no problem. Steering wheel, just the same. Steering wheel encourages you to have your hands at 9 and 3, except what they did is instead of being round, they've straightened the top and the bottom. This is purely an aesthetic choice, not a functional one, and I cannot wait for this trend to die. If you're coming from another vehicle, this rotary shifter will be a bit unusual and might take a little bit of time before it becomes perfect muscle memory. I like the way it works. The shifts are positive, clear, and there's no mistaking which gear you're in, as long as you're paying attention, of course. But what I will say is that this shifter doesn't feel quite as jewelry-like as what Genesis does. Say what you will about this big screen, but what I will say is that it looks expensive. It looks like it belongs in a car that costs tens of thousands of dollars more. It's visible in all kinds of lighting conditions, provides all the information I'm looking for. The infotainment screen does exactly what I want it to do, and it renders Apple CarPlay beautifully. Then you go to adjust the fan speed, and Kia seems to think that this glossy strip is progress. If you are the type of driver that does mess with fan speed, this is not progress. If you're the kind of driver like me that puts it on automatic climate control, then this is no issue. Spaciousness in both rows, storage, cargo carrying capacity all get top marks. It all seems on par with the segment. What you do need to keep in mind is the cargo capacity is a bit reduced because you've sacrificed some space to the traction battery gods. If this episode gave you more information than a brochure or a press release, hit like. It tells YouTube to share this with more people like you interested in an episode like this. It takes just a second. That's what the Sportage plug-in told me after a week behind the wheel. Here's what people who make actual monthly payments on these want you to know. And the biggest complaint across all forums, the 12-volt battery. Not the traction battery, the conventional 12-volt that powers the locks, computers, and startup sequence. When it dies, owners report the car goes completely dark with little warning. Key fob dead, app dead, traction battery charged and useless. The regular Sportage hybrid gets a 12-volt reset button on the dash. The plug-in hybrid replaces it with a fuel door release. Enough owners now carry portable jump packs that it's become part of the ownership routine. Cold climate owners find out quickly that the plug-in has no heat pump. Then, EV mode is conditional. Ask for cabin heat below about 55 degrees Fahrenheit and the engine fires to act as a heater while the battery still drains. The workaround is heated seats, heated steering wheel, and a flexible definition of comfort. Air conditioning works on electric power. Cabin heat does not. Owners of 2023 and 2024 plugins complain about the rear shocks. Some have experienced rear shock failures showing up around 20,000 miles. The theory is simple. The rear dampers were never properly retuned for the extra battery weight. On our 3,000-mile test car, the rear rebound is already soft over larger road imperfections, the same floaty, bouncy behavior owners described before failure is diagnosed. On the upside, Kia covers the shocks under warranty. The question is, what happens after it expires? The most useful owner discovery, and it's something Kia hasn't fully explained, is that Sport mode charges the traction battery. HEV mode mostly maintains charge, Sport builds it. And it was one of the first things that struck me as unusual because I immediately put this into Sport mode as soon as I got behind the wheel. Owners have turned it into a road trip advantage. Run Sport mode before your destination, arrive with a few miles of EV range for city driving. The trade-off is a little bit of fuel economy. The capability's real. Kia just never bothered to advertise it. That's the ownership experience after the new car smell fades. If you own one of these or have some quality seat time in one of these, let me know what I got right and what I got wrong in the comments, because real-world owner experiences are much more valuable than anything I can learn in a week-long press loan, and I always read those comments. This Sportage plug-in makes sense for a specific buyer, someone with a short commute, somewhere to charge at home, and no interest in driving this harder than a compact family crossover needs to be driven. In that situation, it works. It's quiet, efficient, easy to use, and the powertrain is far better sorted than the internet comments would lead you to believe. What this plug-in tells you about Kia is that they know how to prioritize. They had one engineering budget and they spent it where the press reviews and the spec sheet comparisons would notice. The powertrain is the part that shows up in a 15-minute test drive. The suspension is the part that shows up at mile 15,000. So the question is simple. If you plug it in regularly and stay within the mission, this makes perfect sense. If you don't, you're carrying extra weight, extra complexity, and a suspension that hasn't adapted to either. And sure, I prefer my transmissions with gears in them, and that's what Kia has delivered with this plug-in Sportage. Perhaps it's more challenging to resolve a powertrain like this than an ECVT, but here it really does work exactly as promised. The thing is, the transmission's not the compromise. The compromise is everything underneath it. They put a tremendous amount of effort into this powertrain, and it works wonderfully. But it appears they left the suspension alone, and it's the same suspension that has to contend with 300 less pounds of curb weight. That leaves you with a plug-in hybrid powertrain that feels fully resolved and a crossover that isn't quite there yet. And from my perspective, this powertrain deserves a better suspension, and the suspension keeps making a case for it. That's the Sportage plug-in. Subscribe if you want to see more episodes like this. Don't if you don't. Comments are open if you disagree, and the merch store is open if you want to help fund more of these. See you on the next one.